Thursday night edition of the Anaheim Calling podcast. We're back 10 days after recording our last podcast, or 9 days. And man, the world has basically been turned on its head
Yep.
since the last time we recorded. So if you didn't see the news today, or just as a refresher, the National Hockey League has suspended play indefinitely for the 2019-20 NHL season. So just to reiterate what the league put out today, in light of ongoing developments resulting from the coronavirus and after consulting with medical experts and convening a conference call of the Board of Governors, the National Hockey League is announcing today that it will pause the 2019-20 season beginning with tonight's game. So that was put out earlier today. Really, what the straw that broke the camel's back here is that one NBA player on Wednesday night tested positive for the coronavirus, and so the NBA went ahead and postponed its season. The NHL used the term paused, and so we may still get a resolution to the season in the coming months, but for now, everything is put on hold. So there are some particulars to get into, but Jake, just before we get into that, what was your reaction to this when it broke through?
It's the right thing to do. It's definitely the right thing to do. All precautions that can be taken should be taken with this to stop it from essentially spreading throughout the country and becoming essentially a worse situation than it already is. And so I think it's the right move because not only are you protecting your assets and the players, because at the end of the day, that is what, as dumb as this sounds, that is what matters in the situation, at least to the owners, because the players are their assets. That's what they're paying for. And so they're protecting them, but it's also protecting the communities by not having them come to the game and potentially spreading the virus more throughout the community through these larger events. So it was the right thing to do, regardless of how you kind of feel about the virus. You got to take all precautions that are available to you. And at the end of the day, this was what was needed. And so it was the correct move.
Yes, I had no moment of even, oh man, I'm bummed. I was actually happy to see this news because what we know so far about this virus is that it is highly, highly contagious, and really the best thing you can do, according to many different sources throughout the world, is just stay away, stay apart from each other, social distancing. There's multiple examples throughout history of that working to slow down different outbreaks. And so massive sporting events with tens of thousands of people, with players traveling between cities, that just seems like something that if you can put that on pause for a while, you're going to slow it down. And so good on the NHL to follow suit. Good on the NBA and all the other different leagues across the world that have now put a hold on their seasons.
Yeah, which I'll run it through real quick for everyone out there. But for those of you that don't know, here's kind of what's been happening. NCAA basketball has canceled the men's and women's NCAA tournaments, and all of NCAA sports have actually been canceled. So that includes NCAA hockey, so relevant to the Ducks with Trevor Zegras' season officially being over for college hockey. The NBA has suspended their season indefinitely. NHL has suspended indefinitely. MLS has suspended their season, which just got started officially for 30 days is what they're listed at. MLB's opening day has been delayed for 2 weeks. NFL, the owners' meetings have been canceled. The XFL, their season suspended. Supposedly NASCAR is going on this week. I know a lot of Champions League matches have been delayed or suspended, and the Premier League was going to play this weekend, and now the Arsenal manager has come down with the virus, and so Arsenal versus Brighton is not going to be happening, and the Premier League are meeting on the weekend to discuss what the potential path forward is. So most likely Premier League's done, Serie A, the Italian league's done. I know there's plenty of leagues.
Yeah, well, their entire country is quarantined.
Yes. So they're essentially, the biggest thing is a lot of sports are kind of suspending their season. The biggest thing for the NHL, I think, was the fact that the Jazz player came down with the virus, because that kind of puts a halter on the ability to even play a closed door game, because if the locker room had been contaminated, which a locker room Granted, no NHL team in Utah, but the teams that they were playing throughout the time and the teams that they were potentially visiting could have NHL teams. And so that's the reason why you want to keep people away from that as much as possible and just potentially stop it from spreading as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. With the NBA and NHL sharing so many arenas, it was just a matter of time. So I again just want to reiterate that this was the right thing to do, not just from their own perspective, but just from a moral societal perspective. If you're not shutting down large events in a highly contagious outbreak, you're essentially contributing to the problem. And so I fully support it. Um, it is a bit sad to see what was shaping up to be a good playoff race here put on pause and a good playoffs, but we will get a chance to talk about that. So spinning this
Oh,
forward now, go ahead.
real quick, I do want to shout out or say thoughts are out there for anyone that works in the game day staff, works in the arena, anything like that, who
Yeah.
are not specifically employees of the Ducks or players or anything like that that are directly affected by this because
Well, and just anyone whose job is affected by
true.
this. Like, luckily for myself, I'm working from home now. I have the ability to do that. My job is completely unaffected by this. But people who are working in a situation where they have to be at the job, that work on a site, really anyone out there
Well,
that's being affected by this or has family affected, just wishing everybody the best. Follow the proper procedures.
yep.
Stay safe. Stay home if you can, and we'll get through this in a short order, hopefully in a few months.
Yep. And one of the people that I do want to give a shout out to is Varluna, Jennifer, who's been one of our biggest supporters as we've been doing this on Twitch, on Patreon, who is a Disneyland employee, a cast member there. And so with Disneyland being closed, she is now going to have to take a bit of a step back. But I think the good news with Disneyland is they're still going to be paying cast members is something that I've heard. But shout out to you, Jennifer.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, our thoughts are out there with everyone. I'm super lucky that where I work got out ahead of it, and that I'm in a pretty privileged position, and I'm not gonna run from that. I'm feeling pretty lucky today that I can just stay home and keep my head a little bit out of all of it. So, spinning this forward though, what does this mean for the NHL moving forward?
So, there's a couple different things out there. Obviously, there's no strict plan of action for what the league is going to do. This is kind of unprecedented territory. We also have no idea how long the virus is going to take. Like I said, there are certain leagues that, like MLS, that have suspended their season for a strict amount of time that could potentially become more. But with 30 days, MLB also going for 2 weeks for their opening day. So let's just say if it is that 1 month scenario, I think there is a chance that maybe they try to play out the rest of the regular season. And the reason I say this is hockey is a sport that doesn't have the massive TV deals that a sport like basketball has, where you can rely upon that TV money and not the revenue gate. Hockey is a sport that really relies upon the revenue coming into the arenas to really set up your hockey related revenue. So it's not just the owners getting that money, it's also the players getting that money. So I think if that 1 month period becomes true, potentially you see them try to play out the rest of the regular season in a condensed schedule. And then the playoffs after that, they've asked arenas for availability up until July. So you would think the Stanley Cup playoffs usually end what? Early June, typically.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So if you just tack on a month, that would go till July, which is kind of what they're predicting. Now, there's also the situation where they could just say, screw it, we want the playoffs, which James Myrtle in his most recent article said they could potentially do, or he's hearing they would do. In 1 month, 1 month's time is around the time that the playoffs would begin regardless. So the season is just over and you jump into the playoffs, and the teams that make it are based upon points percentage. So essentially you're not tacking on any more regular season games, but you're still getting the playoff revenue in. There's also the potential of it lasting even longer and going further on, and maybe the season is just canceled as a whole and there is no Stanley Cup awarded. And this would be the first time, I believe, let me double check that date, but it would be the first time since 19, I'm looking for it right now. early in the 1900s,
It's been a while.
1919
Yeah.
was the first time. It was due to the Spanish flu. The only other time that the cup wasn't awarded was in the 04-05 lockout. So this would only be the second time when a regular season was played that the cup was not awarded. So I'll be really curious. I think the biggest impact of this, yes, people want to watch hockey. Yes, it can be a distraction for everyone out there in this tough time. But I think the biggest impact that you'll see from this situation is kind of what I talked about with the money and the fact that hockey-related revenue is a big issue. And we've seen a full season lockout because of it. We've seen a half season lockout because of a CBA negotiation with the players wanting to get more of that hockey related revenue. So I think my personal opinion on this is I think they're going to try everything they can to try to play the rest of those regular season games and fit in the playoffs also and do it in a condensed schedule. That's my personal opinion on this and could be completely wrong. And one of the things that makes me kind of question that opinion of myself is there is something that Pierre LeBrun brought up in the CBA. And so for those of you out there that don't know, the hockey related revenue that I'm bringing up kind of affects the salary cap for the next year and how high or how low it will go. And so that they were actually projecting a pretty nice raise in the salary cap for next year. And if you're losing all the playoff revenue, that's going to cause a big drop in that. But there is actually something in the CBA that allows for the NHL and Players Association to basically throw out the hockey-related revenue and agree to an artificial cap figure in the case of an emergency like this. So that may give credence to the idea that they may just cancel the season and start the playoffs right away, or just cancel all of it together. So there's a whole lot up in the air. Crazy Mexicano asks us, do you guys think it will go that far? I honestly have no clue.
I don't think anyone has the answers. I don't think no one has the answers
No.
because no one knows how long this will last.
No.
We're in totally uncharted waters, and for the NHL, they're putting on a really brave face and saying, that they have kind of these timelines of when they're going to reevaluate, but realistically, this is going to get exponentially worse by the week.
Yeah.
And so, my own thought on this, my own opinion, and we'll get yours, Jake, here in a second, is that I think that they're going to play later into the summer and they're going to go straight into the playoffs. There's not going to be time to do a regular season. And to be quite honest, as someone who's not a fan of those wild card hunting teams, I don't really care to see it. I know that would be absolutely disappointing for those fans. Maybe they can work out some kind of wild card game, some kind of play-in little mini tournament where instead of doing a 10-game regular season, you just do a little play-in for those, because really this is about 4 to 6 teams, and everyone else is fairly set in stone, and then you go right into the playoffs. But that's all the projections for this virus have it getting far worse, and so I don't see how in 30 days we're just going to be able to start sending athletes out traveling city to city again, because there's going to be so many restrictions placed by states. We're seeing California placing bans. We're seeing cities placing bans, counties placing bans, and the NHL is not bigger than the government. And so at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to just overrule that because they want to play and they want to get their money. So I think that they're going to be dealt a pretty hard hand here when they reevaluate.
It's completely possible. And that, my opinion, was basically based on that revenue. But you're right. There's a whole lot at play here that we just really don't have a whole lot of insight to. I do want to bring this up. I have an interesting thought on this that I'm curious for your take on this. Trying to bring it back to hockey and kind of lighten up the situation a little bit. So let's say the scenario plays out where a month or two goes by. Let's just go with a month. And they say, all right, the playoffs are starting now. It's just the teams points percentage wise that make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that it may be beneficial. Let's say, granted, everyone can remain healthy. No one gets sick on those playoff teams. They get a month or a week to prepare for the playoff series, to get themselves back into game shape, get practices going, everything like that, get back in the swing of things. I think we may get one of the best playoffs that we've ever had, because you will have rested players going into those playoffs. Maybe I think the first round will be absolutely insane because you
Oh
have
yeah,
rusty teams and guys that are rested on top of that. But I think that because the issue with the playoffs a lot of times is come the cup final, the hockey's not great because guys are hurt. Guys are tired. They've gone through an entire grind of a season. I think that this may actually cause a really great cup final because you'll have two teams that were able to rest guys for a month going into the playoffs.
As a fan of the sport and the league, I want to see a Stanley Cup award this season. That's all that I really care about. So whether or not the New York Rangers or Florida Panthers secure the last wild card spot in the East to get fed to the slaughter of the Boston Bruins is not something that I'm particularly concerned by. I mean, just look at the picture. In the Atlantic Division, Tampa Bay and Boston have those top two spots locked up. That is not changing. In the Metro, Washington and Philly, it's a little closer. So there's a 1 point spread, 90 and 89 between Philly and Washington. And then you have Pittsburgh, that's 4 points back of Washington. And then after that, Carolina's 5 points back of Pittsburgh. So that picture, if we were to play out the rest of the regular season, it seems pretty set. 5 points is a lot to overcome for the Hurricanes to get into that divisional bracket. And then in the West, you have St. Louis with 94 points, Colorado with 92 points, the Central. So they're both at least 10 points ahead of Dallas in third place. So again, you've got two spots that are essentially locked in. Now, of course, the difference between 1 and 2 in this format does make a pretty big difference, but still, we know those teams are in. In the Pacific, well, it's the Pacific. It's the minor league division of the league. So you've got Vegas leading with 86 points. But then after that, I mean, you've got Edmonton and Calgary with 83 and 79. And the closest Pacific team after that is Vancouver with 78. So really only one other team from the Pacific could jump in there.
By points percentage, here's the playoffs. This is per Pro Hockey Rumors did this calculation. So in the Atlantic Division, you'd have Boston, Tampa, Toronto. In the Metro, you'd have Washington, Philly, Pittsburgh. The wild cards would be wild card 1, Carolina. Wild card 2 would be the Islanders. So you would get Carolina, Washington in the first round, New York Islanders versus Boston, Tampa, Toronto, Philly, Pittsburgh. And then in the Central, you'd get St. Louis, Colorado, Dallas. In the Pacific, Vegas, Edmonton, Vancouver. And then the first wild card is Nashville. Second wild card is Calgary. So
only two. So one team in each conference is getting swapped out, basically.
Yeah.
So you have Columbus in the East, and you've got Winnipeg in the West.
It's very, very tight in the West, and that may be the only gripe that teams might have is.
They're going to be angry. They're going to because for those teams especially. So a Vancouver or a Columbus making the playoffs is hugely important.
So here's the points percentages for anyone out there. So Nashville's at 565, Vancouver's at 565, Calgary is at 564, Winnipeg's at 563.
God, just all these mediocre teams.
They're so mediocre.
So mediocre, but they are part of the league, and they got to get a fair shake. To me, points percentage is good because it cuts through the games played issue.
Maybe what they do is they look at doing. I mean, the real way
I would love a wild card game.
You do a wild card playing game, a 1-game playoff between the 4 teams in the wild card situation. So it gets
have a bracket between Winnipeg, Nashville, Vancouver, Minnesota.
Well, and it gets let me see. It gets Florida and Columbus in also.
And that would be fun as hell to watch.
Yeah. So maybe
I would absolutely watch a wild card little mini tournament.
Yeah, it would be so much fun.
Would you rather that or play out the rest of the regular season in a compressed schedule?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, if they did do this, then the tank off is set. The odds are set. The Ducks would end with the fifth best odds. So based upon points percentage, they had 67 points, and so their points percentage was 944. LA 914. The real interesting thing, Ottawa will have potentially 2 top 3 picks.
Yeah. Well, we've known that for a while.
We didn't know that they would have 2 top 3 picks.
Well, we still don't know that. We know that they have good odds for it.
They have the best odds to get number 1 overall.
Yeah. So, Ottawa, Ottawa had a good season organizationally.
Yeah, very
I
much
think
so.
so. Okay, we're gonna jump into our first break here. On the other side of that, we're actually going to talk about the Ducks. So we will be right back. Okay, back from our first break. Whew, that was a lot.
Yeah.
This is the craziest times that I've been through. These are the craziest times I've been through as a hockey fan.
This is something you'll tell your grandkids about.
This defies the lockout, because the lockout is just rich people arguing over the pie, essentially.
There are no sports on TV.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Do you know what's going to be on TV tomorrow though?
Well, I know wrestling is still doing empty. They're doing empty stadiums,
which is going to be the weirdest thing of all time,
and
because
UFC is also doing empty stadiums.
See, UFC doing empty stadiums fine as long as they're tested and fine. Wrestling doing it is weird because part of wrestling is the crowd. So yeah, WWE has moved SmackDown to their Performance Center with a very limited crowd. AEW is moving their next show, because their next show is supposed to be in New York, which canceled stuff. They're moving that to moving that down to Florida because the owners own the Jaguars, and there's a little amphitheater with a very small, limited crowd.
We'll see how long that continues, because I would imagine that travel restrictions are going to start kicking in too.
I'm curious how if WrestleMania is going to go on. Supposedly it is, but we'll see. April 4th, I think, is the date for it at the Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, where the Buccaneers play.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the Ducks here.
All right, fair.
So since we recorded, the Ducks have played in 6 games, and it's been a bit of a helter-skelter type pace. They've played a 3-4. They've played some really good teams, some really bad teams, aka the Senators, and they haven't really had any consistently good performances outside of maybe the Leafs game that they played on the 6th, the game against the Avalanche, which feels like an eon ago now, where they won in overtime, where Rickard Rakell snapped his goalless streak. To me, was their best game just in terms of watchability, because it was a really exciting game.
So you're not telling me that a Nick Deslauriers first period hat trick was the most watchable thing during the past week?
Gonna go with no.
Okay.
Gonna go with no. But so since the season is paused, we're gonna use the NHL's terminology, although my opinion is more canceled. Let's look back on this season that was, because for all intents and purposes, the Ducks season is over. When the NHL comes back, if and when it comes back, the Ducks are not going to be playing any type of consequential role in the pecking order.
No.
So
if anything, it's just going to be what we've seen if they do play out the stretch, that it's going for positioning for draft picks.
Yeah. So let's just kind of not recap the past games, but just look over the last 10 days here. Just talk about maybe some trends that you've seen that have come up, or things that you've noticed, good or bad, and let's hash those out a little bit, and then we can move on to some bigger picture season-wide topics.
One of the interesting things that I've noticed, and I'm going to give this guy credit, is that I think David Backes has actually been decent for the Ducks.
Wow, this is a moment in history.
What?
You were the biggest, and I mean the biggest, opponent of that trade.
Oh, I still think the trade isn't great.
I know, but it's just funny to even hear you say anything remotely
opinions
positive.
Can change.
They can.
I've been open to change. My opinions have changed. David Backes, though, it's interesting. When you've removed the shackles of Derek Grant from that line.
Wait, so hold on a second. I just want to stop you there, though. By what metric has he been good?
So I think before the Ottawa game was when I looked at it.
Because he's sitting on a hot and spicy 40% Corsi for percentage
over the last 6 games, right?
Yeah, and a 41% expected goals for percentage.
Give me 1 sec to look up.
I mean, it's an insanely small sample of 50 minutes, but
yeah,
just my own observations while you do your little searching.
Yeah.
I think David Backes has been fine as a fourth liner. The numbers that he's actually posted, although I am criticizing them a little bit, are actually an improvement over Derek Grant.
Yep.
And he's looked serviceable out there, not really a huge detriment to the team. He is extremely physical. He's constantly looking to hit guys, which I think is something that the Ducks valued. He has gotten a goal now as a Duck. So overall, I think that what we're learning is that the Ducks probably see him as their fourth line center for next season. I think that that
All right.
is what they're looking for here.
So I've got some numbers for you. So it's gone down. I think the Ottawa game really killed it because it was much better before that game, which shows you sample size. Derek Grant. So Deloria, Rowney, Grant as a line had a 43% Corsi for percentage, 47% goals for percentage, 41% expected goals for percentage.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what that means, basically when they were out there, the Ducks were getting massively outshot attempted, getting the worst of the scoring chances. So not good.
And also the worst of the goals. Like
Yeah, and just simply goals for percentage, they were also getting outscored.
Yeah,
so
5-on-5.
essentially, when you think about what you want from a fourth line, you just don't want to get beat on the scoreboard when they're out there, and they were not meeting any of those criteria.
Yep. So with David Backes, Nick, that line of Backes, Deloria, Rowney, 45% Corsi for percentage, so slight improvement, small
That's
sample,
a considerable spike.
52 minutes versus 282 though.
Mhm.
Goals for percentage, 66%.
Yeah. So
Expected goals for percentage though, 53%.
there you go. Bob Murray, genius level.
Yeah.
Genius level 4D chess.
Having said that, David Backes is not worth the $4 million that they're paying him now.
No.
They should have potentially, I'm still going to go take that for a long time, is that they should have gotten more back for taking on that contract. But regardless, looking at the pure impact of the player on the ice for the Ducks removing the contract, it's been solid and it's been an improvement on what Derek Grant did for them. Now, you could make the argument that's exactly the opposite of what the Ducks could use right now. But regardless, it's been solid. And I think
I'm not even really sure I agree with that anymore. That,
Okay.
That they should have, that this is a bad use of a roster spot, just because who are they going to put at fourth line center that's not a
Lundstrom.
veteran?
Oh, yeah, fair.
But is that, is 10 minutes a night I know that this is a kind of tired argument, but I think Lundstrom probably benefits more for what he needs specifically as a guy who needs more responsibility to play in San Diego.
I'd agree with that.
We'll see if he's on the Ducks because of their conundrum anyway.
I think David Backes may be the reason. Well, he before this was probably the reason why, but I don't think the Ducks bring back Derek Grant as much as there was that hot stove. There's also that from the weekend that we should get into at some point. Some of the quotes from there, but there was that Bob Murray would like to bring back Derek Grant if he can. I don't know if you should or if there's space.
I think that's just lip service. Personally.
It's possible. It's possible.
Because, of course, he may actually believe that and think that, but that doesn't mean he's actually going to do it.
Yep.
Or even try to.
By the way, Bionic Chris said that the Backes take was one of my takes. It was a Jake take.
Yeah. Well, so I guess because this is the circumstances are so extenuating here, we're kind of going a little off script from that.
Yeah.
So we'll be back to that structure when the podcasts get a little more normal, but
who knows when that is.
This is knock on wood that it'll be sooner rather than later. To me, this is something that I've talked about a bunch of times, but the trend that is still holding even after these games where the Ducks have been outplayed is that Christian Juice is just good. Juice is good. So before I get into the stats, just watching him play, he's clearly a competent puck-moving defenseman, which for those who have listened to our podcast over the last 2 years, when we're talking about a Ducks third pairing, competent is not a word that we've used very often to describe any player that's been on the third pairing. So just to have a competent player in any respect, let alone puck moving, which is extremely important, is a huge, huge upgrade for the Ducks. So Christian Juice has shown that he's very good at moving the puck, really good vision, not the fastest skater, but he is mobile. And then in the offensive zone, he's actually shown some playmaking ability. He's already gotten his first goal as a Duck. He's gotten some nice assists. And then looking at the stats, just the underlying stuff, when he's out there on the ice, the Ducks control 55% of the expected goals percentage. So that is pretty impressive that on a team that is getting kicked in on a lot of nights because they're so undermanned, that the Ducks are managing to even be that positive with him out there. Of course, that's not all him, but I think that it's not surprising to me that they're doing well with a guy who can move the puck
Well,
like that.
and it's interesting. The person who's played the most minutes with, Yanni Hakanpää.
Yeah. So, and Yanni Hakanpää, who we should also mention in the makeup game last night against St. Louis, got his first goal in the NHL, not just on the
Against
Ducks.
the team. I believe he was drafted by the Blues. If not,
Yes, he was drafted by the Blues. So, I mean, the Hakanpää thing, I'm a bit more wait and see. He has been decent though in recent games, and so you kind of just mash that all together. And I know that you weren't the highest on Bob Murray's trade deadline, and I think that there's definitely good reasons for that. But in terms of what he actually did, I think you can already pretty clearly see that the Ducks are just a little better on the margins.
Yeah,
right? Those little areas that were kind of holding them back. So fourth line, third pairing, those kind of things are better.
I'd make the argument that I think at the time I said he moved pieces and did a little bit of shuffling, a little bit of tinkering. Those are the types of things that you do when you're contending and not when you're in a rebuild, though. I think that was my biggest issue with these types of deals. The Juice the Juice trade has been much better than I expected. Fully will admit that.
If he continues if they actually play him next season, right? If this isn't a Sprong thing all over again, where he's only playing because of injuries, then I think you can really be confident in the deal.
And the other thing I do want to say, and I think that this is important, and not trying to be a complete buzzkill here, but trying to somewhat temper expectations a little bit. But we were saying the same thing about Brendan Gooley last year.
We were, although what I would say to that though is that I don't think Brendan Gooley ever was this impressive on different markers. So
he was pretty impressive with his stats with Fowler last year and the numbers that he was putting up, the underlying numbers that we were saying.
Well, that's fair, but he's also playing with Cam Fowler, who it turns out is actually really, really good, and we've been probably underestimating for a little while.
True.
Whereas Juice is doing this with Yanni Hakanpää.
That is a fair point.
On a Ducks team that is completely revamped with outside of Josh Manson, no NHL caliber
completely
defenseman.
Fair.
So I just think that what he's doing, although it is impressive, and Gooley was also impressive, the circumstances that Juice is playing under make his results more impressive. But yeah, so those are the things that have stood out to me. Outside of that, I think Danton Heinen has looked a little better. He's shown some playmaking chops, which we just didn't really see out of Nick Ritchie. Nick Ritchie not really known for playmaking. Any other takeaways that you have just in the last little stretch here of the season?
What's another take that I have?
Another Jake take. Let's keep that alive.
This is not a great. I mean, this is not a hot one at all. But Rickard Rakell and Jakob Silfverberg play really well together, and they should have been playing with each other for most of the season.
Yeah, well, I am very curious what this team will look like next season because I hate to say this because it feels so. I know it's anti what we've said for a long time, but if Trevor Zegras comes up, the kids are a little better now that the fringes are a little kind of rounded out now with the third pairing, fourth line. John Gibson is a bounce back season. Ooh. Are the Ducks better than some of those current teams that are sitting outside of the wild card? I mean, this is the trap we fell into last year.
We definitely did because we talked ourselves into the Ducks being playoff.
I think the big problem for the Ducks moving forward, and we're going to get many more chances to talk about this, but it's that they're without a true first line center. Because Getzlaf just isn't that anymore, right?
They're really relying upon Trevor Zegras to step in and take that spot.
Well, if Zegras can come in, and I love how we're just doing a 2020, 2021 preview, Olsen, but if Zegras can come in and be half of what we hope he'll be, and then you have Sam Steele taking a step forward, who probably should in the age range that he's in. Maybe Lundestrom comes up. You still have Adam Henrique, who's in there, who knows where he fits by the time next season rolls around. But
is he trade bait come summer? I mean, look at the season. We've talked about this a bit about the season that he's had.
The issue with Henrique is that you have Isaac Lundestrom there. So if Zegras comes up, your centers are Getzlaf, Steele, Zegras, Henrique, Backus. So you're already at 5 centers. And then you've got Lundestrom, who at some point is going to have to play in the NHL. So yeah, someone is going to be left out of that shuffle. it only makes sense. Okay, but let's save that for another day. We've got plenty to talk about here. So we're kind of coming up here on the
Oh,
second break.
I do
Go
want to
ahead.
ask you. This is something we can talk about for the next couple minutes or so. Go Ducks 10 asked. Sherwood has not been very, or not asked, but just said Sherwood has not been very impactful lately. So
Oh God,
what are your thoughts?
Jake is all over this one.
What
Why
are
don't you
your
just go for
thoughts?
it? Why don't you just go for it?
No, I want your thoughts. Hit me with it. Hit me with it.
I don't know. I think that the most problematic thing with Sherwood hasn't really been too much of his play on the ice because it's a small sample. If he's playing poorly, I'm not saying I'm willing to just let that totally go under the radar, but I'm willing to give him more of a shot because he hasn't really gotten one. To me, the weird thing has been the penalty trouble because his penalty rate has gone up. He's taken really bad penalties at really inopportune times. You think back to that Colorado game. Could that just be dumb luck and that will correct itself over time? Maybe. Hopefully, if you're the Ducks, but that is kind of a weird one. I don't know. I don't really have too much to take away from it, just because I have seen him be much better, and I am willing to give him a bit more of a leash there.
That's fair. I have not been really impressed with him at
I mean,
all.
that's fine. Neither have I.
I think
Just to be
the
clear.
best way to put what I've seen from him kind of in this into this format is
He's not wearing 61 on his back is the issue.
I mean, sure. That's part of it potentially. No,
Potentially. I like that.
no, I think the biggest thing for him is he's working hard. I actually was talking with Bonnie about this the other day. I think he's definitely working hard, but I don't think that's always working smart, if that makes sense. As in skating and looking like you're skating hard and going all out. While yes, it gets you in on the forecheck, but it's not always putting yourself into good positions. And so I think that's the thing for him that has been the issue this season so far with the Ducks is I don't think anyone can doubt his work ethic or how hard he's working, but I don't think he's necessarily in the best positions. And I think that's where he's suffering.
Well, I think he's in a bit of a precarious spot just because he didn't get an opportunity until late in the season.
Yeah, that's true.
And now it's like, okay, well, I got to make up for lost time here and I've got to go all out. And potentially that can affect a player's mentality, just their approach to the game. The stats are pretty jarring, though. In 10 games this season, he's got a 41% on-ice shot attempt share and a 34% expected goals for percentage. So, yikes. Those are bad numbers. But again, it's a tiny sample. We've seen him be better in the past, and I just kind of hope for him that he gets another shot next year. We'll have to see what that looks like.
Yep.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say this also before we get into some questions and go into our break. But so now that the NCAA hockey season is completely over, here's your scoring update. You wanna hear this, Felix?
Let's go into our second break. So we will be right back. Okay, back from the second break. So NCAA score updates or whatever you're gonna do.
Freshman scoring is what I'm looking at. So true freshman scoring. First in the country is Alex Newhook with 42 points in 34 games. Second, Trevor Zegras, 35 points in 32 games. Third on the list, Cole Caulfield, 36 points in 36 games. So there you have it, the top three.
Yeah, that is going to be interesting because now they're all going to come out of college.
Well, that's the thing of note is that Alex Turcotte had already, I guess, essentially signed. It had been confirmed, I believe, by someone in Wisconsin that he was leaving and was going to be joining the Ontario Reign this weekend. So
and now that's not happening.
That's not happening. But I mean, you would assume that if the NHL playoffs go on, the AHL playoffs will probably also restart and happen. So there's potential that Trevor Zegras could be playing on the goals in the playoffs, which could be beneficial for him with the fact that his season is now ended early, ended before the conference championship tournament, and potentially an NCAA tournament. So he may be more driven to come out of college to join the goals now because of the fact that he could get a playoff run out of it.
Well, and also just, looking at the AHL playoffs, if and when they come back, those are going to be some really fun playoffs because you're going to have that influx of college guys who are going to bolster some of those lineups. And so the Gulls lineup in the playoffs could be really interesting because they're going to stock it up with all their young guys, and you're going to potentially add Zegras into the mix. So that could be a playoff run for the ages. Of course, they're holding down a position now, but I don't think it's not a guarantee they're in, right? I
Yeah,
haven't actually checked.
but I believe they have a pretty solid spot. Also, Troy Terry,
Okay.
by the way, with the goals, 4 points last night's game.
There you go.
There you
Troy
go.
Terry.
Lewis.
Also, I just want to point out that Alex Newhook was drafted 16th overall by the Avalanche last summer.
Yeah.
And he's the highest scoring freshman.
I am
what
curious.
What is it with the Avalanche? And
I
just
am
nailing
curious
everything?
if part of it is teammates and the team that he's.
God.
No, but
right.
that is a relevant point in all of this, in the fact that you look at the team, and Boston College is kind of a juggernaut this year, and BU is kind of a middle of the pack team.
Yeah.
So
Zegras is just. I mean, I'm not saying he's better than Zegras. Putting that out there.
I'm just adding that could be potentially part of it.
I raised your alarm bells
a little bit.
Before we get into questions, though, I did want to take a look back at the season because
go for it.
The season is essentially over for the Ducks, or it is over. Let's just do two little superlatives here. So, what was the most surprising thing to you from the Anaheim Ducks this year, from this season?
Let's go with a good surprising and a bad surprising.
Well, so we're gonna do the surprise meaning good, and then we'll do the biggest disappointment.
Okay. Surprise being good is how good of a season Cam Fowler had. I think Fowler is the biggest surprise. He's always been great for the Ducks, but you look at what he did with and how he elevated his teammates and his line mates. It's pretty impressive what he was able to do this year. And I think that, in my personal opinion, he is the Duck that had the best season this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I was going to pick Cam Fowler as well, but I will take a different tact. So to me, the thing that was the biggest surprise from a positive perspective, Troy Terry didn't have at all this season, I think, that anyone would have hoped, just from a pure scoring perspective. But he turned into a pretty decent player at 5-on-5, and maybe this is indicating that eventually maybe his role is going to be more of a two-way guy who can chip in offensively, maybe be a power play specialist. But regardless, I do think that we saw signs of progress from Troy Terry that we hadn't really seen before. And so I would have him up there as my positive surprise of the season.
Hey, I'll take it.
I beat you to it. I'll take it.
I mean, you didn't beat me to it because I went first. So
that's true.
I just didn't pick it.
Do you have another positive surprise? Maybe we should pile those up a little bit.
What's another positive?
I mean, to be fair, it hasn't been a great season for the Ducks. And Derek Grant is now gone, so we don't have that card to play.
Let's go with Adam Henrique having a sneaky good year. And I think that's something.
25 goals, 24 goals.
25 goals.
Yep.
Where did his point totals ended up at? He's at 43 points in 71 games. So right on pace for around 50 points is where he would have ended up at the end of the year if you kind of take that. 50 points for Adam Henrique is solid. Like, that's exactly what, like, if you look at his contract, that is exactly the type of point production that you need to get proper value from that. And so that's good for the Ducks on multiple fronts. It's
Great
good
value.
that they're getting good value out of a player. It's also good because it also could set them up to trade him by for someone looking at him and not being scared away from that contract because he's putting up the points necessary for that cap hit. Now, granted, he is 30, but still.
Yeah, I mean, he could definitely help a contender.
Yes.
It's just most contenders probably don't have the room to bring in a guy like that in terms of cap space. So another positive surprise for me, I think just the fact that some of Hampus Lindholm's numbers were still relatively solid despite the really weird season that he had that got ended prematurely with his injury. I do think that he still is part of the solution for the Ducks long term. He had to deal with a partner in Josh Manson who kind of just fell off a cliff almost, it seemed at times. He did, I think, rally a little bit towards the end, but the fact that Hampus Lindholm still managed to be above break even in shot attempts, despite some of that, is a testament that he is still a very solid and very capable first pairing defenseman. And, we'll see if that ends up holding true after this injury, depending what the Ducks blue line looks like next year. But I do think that he was still a constant for that team that really didn't get talked about. He's got the kind of game that just doesn't really flash, but he is still, again, part of the solution for the Ducks moving forward.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
Disappointment time?
Oh, well, okay. Why don't you go first? Take this one.
All right. Should I take which one do I want to take?
There's different ways to go here.
There are. I'm going to go with one that I think is obvious, and I don't think he's the problem with the team, but I think if you were to look at why the results are bad and compare, some people would wonder why the results are this bad this year when you compare it to last year. I think it's the fact that John Gibson, if the expectation for him was to have a Vezina type season, it is a disappointment how he performed this year.
Yeah, which is kind of unfair to him in a way because
look at the team in front of him.
And also just you shouldn't expect a guy.
Yep.
That shouldn't be where but to John Gibson's credit, he has been so insanely good the last 3 years that you almost can't help but expect that.
Yeah.
He's been statistically the best goaltender in the NHL for the last few years now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, that's not the one I was going to pick just because I figured you might take it. But yeah, I think a lot of how this season has gone for the Ducks can be traced back to, in terms of results, in terms of the standings,
yes,
can be traced back to the fact that John Gibson hasn't been the magic eraser to just erase all problems and to erase all of their defensive miscues, all of their growing pains. That's what he could have been for this team this year. He wasn't that, and ultimately, I don't hold that against him. And
Agreed.
I do think that you should, if you're you should still be holding on to your John Gibson stock. I don't think it's time to just think, okay, the injuries, the workload have caught up to John Gibson, and now we're going to see this precipitous decline. Really good goalies have bad seasons. It happens. Let's see what he looks like next season before starting to get really worried.
Yeah.
Also, I should mention that statistically, him and Frederik Andersen were just as bad from a goal saved above expected perspective. So.
Yep. Oh, real quick before we get into yours, I want to give a shout out to Zo6, who subscribed to Twitch Prime for the second straight month, and Bionic Chris, who subscribed at Tier 1 for 6 months. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. So mine is Dallas Eakins. Sorry, Jake. But we were sold a bag of goods last summer and I think that there was also a lot of hype around Dallas Eakins. How could there not be, given that the Ducks, had Randy Carlyle as their coach to start last season, and then didn't have an actual NHL head coach to end the season. They had their GM who had no coaching experience behind the bench. Dallas Eakins was a really popular coach in San Diego, had some success there, was, billed as a guy who was really good with developing younger players, and was going to bring this maybe more exciting style. And I just feel like none of those things materialized. Let's just look at the facts. The Ducks were not a tire fire this year at 5-on-5, which I guess is an improvement over last year, but they still weren't very good. They were still bottom tier. And if you look at the development of the young players, which was, I think, another one of his calling cards, because one of the selling points was, hey, he has familiarity with these guys. He's going to be able to get his message through to them quicker. Well, regardless of if the message got through, it didn't seem to result in these super positive outcomes. Sam Steele had decent moments this season, but wasn't really a standout, and statistically, not an impressive resume. Brendan Gooley, to me, took a step back this season. Jacob Larson had a horrendous season, and maybe part of that is playing with Corbin and Holzer. Who knows? Max Comtois, after looking pretty good under Randy Carlyle last year, maybe that some of that was just driven by some shooting luck, but he took a step back and had to be sent down to the AHL. Max Jones looked okay, but I wouldn't call this season this huge step forward for him. Then you look at the power play for the Ducks. I thought that it was impressively bad for very long stretches. And then just overall, I didn't find their style of play really that much more advanced, that much more exciting than what they had before. So, yeah, my disappointment is Dallas Eakins.
I
This is
think
not to say that he is never going to be a good coach, that he can never get through to the younger players. There's only so much you can do as a coach. I'm not writing him off, but empirically, the early returns have not been good.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, I will say that I think we have seen at points in time the type of game that we thought he would bring, but it has.
Yeah, but it's
It
washed out pretty
Yeah,
severely.
I would agree with that. I think that I'm not saying he gets a pass for year one because I don't think that's the case. I think that this needs to be evaluated in the grand scheme of things, but I think that he should be given at least one more year, obviously, as the
Sure.
head coach of the Ducks to see what he truly is. And I think one
I think he's
season,
got a 2-year contract, right?
yeah, but I think that I think the real kind of judgment of how he is as a coach, it would be next season after he's had one full year with the team and then has an off season to make adjustments. And I think that we'll see next season. I think by the end of next season, have a good idea of how he is
I
as a
mean,
coach.
you just look at the numbers. The Ducks were 26th in shot attempt percentage and 28th in expect. I mean, these are the numbers
Yep.
that people admonish Carlisle for.
Yep.
So
I agree. And I
yeah.
am completely agreeing that it has not been good enough this year.
But I am still willing definitely to see another season of it, to now kind of see the different things ironed out. I think you'll have a better roster next season. I think that we probably, including the Ducks, overrated or overestimated what they had on their actual roster going into this year.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think proper adjustments will be made, at least to some degree. And with the bottom tier of the Western Conference kind of being a mixed bag, potentially the Ducks could get back into it. And especially, here's my way too early hot take. If John Gibson is back to being John Gibson next season, Dallas Eakins will win the Jack Adams Award.
So you're going with the old adage of show me a good coach and I'll show you a good goalie?
Well, think about it. It's going to be...
there's a reason why that's a saying.
Yes, because there's a correlation. Look at the Ducks this year. They weren't good. No one paid attention to them. Next year, all of a sudden, look at these young, exciting Ducks with Trevor Zegras winning all these games. And I'm not saying it will be undeserved, but if John Gibson gets back to that form or even close, I think Dallas Eakins is going to have a nod there.
Does Trevor Zegras come out of college? Point blank.
I think so.
Yeah. I think
so.
I think at this point, all the writing's there. I think if the Goals play in the playoffs, I think he signs and plays with them for their playoff run. Because, I mean, why not? He's not going to get an NCAA tournament. He's not going to get an ECAC. The only thing is maybe he views missing out on those tournaments as a reason to go back to get one good run with Boston University in.
I feel like today's generation is a little different, where they just want to get to the pros, and I don't begrudge them for it. I don't know if that's actually true for everybody, of course, but Zegras is very good, and he's dominated college hockey. He's dominated every level so far. So I just don't know. Maybe developmentally he would benefit from another year, but I think he's already good enough to make the jump. He's already dominated that level.
Yeah,
so.
And I think if he comes out, he's not going to be in the AHL.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to talk about that eventually. That's going to be the talk, because if he comes out, you've got a logjam at center.
Yeah.
So
I think the writing might be on the wall for an Adam Henrique trade come summer.
It could be. It's still to be determined, but it seems like it's in the cards.
Yeah. Yep. Want to get into some questions or anything else you want to touch on?
Let's do it.
All right. So for those of you out there watching the YouTube video, yes, we post this on YouTube. If you want to comment on the videos, we will monitor those, reply, and anything like that else on there. But if you want to like and subscribe to the channel, like the videos, it really does help out a lot. And also, obviously, there's the recorded version of this show. But the real fun thing is our Twitch stream at twitch.tv/acpod, where you can interact with us live and really help support the show. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every time, where you can help support the show. And you get special emotes in the chat, special badges next to your name. Does anyone out there, or start throwing some questions in there, but I do want to briefly mention we talked about the future of the podcast last time. Keep sending the names our way. We've gotten them, we're compiling them, and we'll put them all together and try to figure out and go from there. And if this is the off season, Felix and I do not have a plan in place as of yet for what we're going to do. We will definitely have our Patreon episodes, though, moving forward, the 2 a month. And in terms of regular shows, that is up in the air for when we will be doing them again. And so keep an eye on our Twitter feeds for that information. Let's go with this, though. Bonnie kind of asked, who do you think would be best suited for the power play? We've talked about the power play being an issue. What do you think, or what type of lineup changes would you like to see for the power play?
So for next season?
Yes.
So Trevor Zegras, he's a lefty or is he a righty? You should know this off the top of your head. He is a lefty. Okay. So looking at that, I think that your ideal power play for next season is going to be Christian Juice at the top, Ryan Getzlaf down low.
Christian Juice and not Cam Fowler. Interesting.
Okay, well, Juice, Fowler, interchangeable. I don't see that as the big kind of component of this power play.
Not Josh Mahura?
No, not Josh Mahura. But maybe, sure. I mean, whatever. Again, I don't see that as a high leverage.
I'm just trying to derail you a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad you actually said it, now that it's out in the open. And then I have Terry on the right circle. I have Getzlaf or Zegras in the middle. I have Raquel on the left side, left circle. And then again, Zegras/Getzlaf in front of the net. Or, I mean, it's not technically in front of the net. It's more on the goal line, making those down low plays. That, to me, is the best that the Ducks could put out there. I think it's the most functional. Some of the names might not make the most sense because you might ask yourself, well, why not Jakob Silverberg? Or why not Sam Steele, who's shown some promise? But to me, the Ducks have looked their best when Troy Terry has been in the right circle. He just seems to make them go because he facilitates that movement. I am still holding on to the notion that Rickard Rakell could be a threat from the left circle. It has not materialized, but he also hasn't really been in the best environment to where we could see that consistently. So put Rickard Rakell there, give him some opportunities to not even just fire one-timers, but just be a threat. And then having one of Getzlaf or Zegras in the middle and down low, you're going to have some good playmaking guys who can bump it out, make plays from down low. I just cancel the Ryan Getzlaf at the point experiment. We didn't see as much of that this season, but we did still see it fairly consistently. Just cancel that. It doesn't work. I think if you've got one of the best passers in the game and in franchise history, it would make sense to have him closer to the net and where he can be more dangerous. So that is, to answer Bonnie's question, how I would do the power play. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I think that probably works out fine and would make sense. Real quick, we kind of missed this, and it's not, I don't really know anything about him, but I do want to mention it. The Ducks signed a guy, Bryce Kindop. 20-year-old. So I don't know, probably just an AHL signing. Don't really know a whole lot about him, but at least wanted
people liked him. But yeah, well, let's wait and see on that one.
Yeah. So, let's see. Lewis X209 said, biggest NHL offseason hot take. It can be anything around the league.
Oh, man. Well, it's really hard to think about that right now, but let's allow ourselves to imagine a little bit. My biggest hot take is that Taylor Hall re-signs in Arizona.
That is actually a very big hot take.
Yep. After hearing, which podcast was it? Was it 31 Thoughts, where they were talking about how the Coyotes they just do everything differently from a behind-the-scenes perspective, how they treat their players. I think that will sell Taylor Hall. Now, I think he wants to win, and the Coyotes have not made a case that they're capable of doing that. But hey, there's something to be said for being treated nicely, playing in a warm weather environment, and on an up-and-coming team. So there you go.
Biggest NHL offseason take. The Maple Leafs move one of their core pieces.
That is a hot take because just logistically that's hard to do.
It is very hard to do, but if they lose in the first round again,
which they will.
They have not had a great season.
No.
I think that one of those guys might get moved. Go Ducks 10 asked, if the Ducks stay put and they just end up with the number 5 overall pick, do they take Jamie Drysdale?
Maybe. It's hard to say because their defense core is still not the deepest, but they also could use another impact forward.
And
If I were the Ducks, I would still lean forward.
Yep, I would definitely lean forward. I would try to get. I feel like Stutzel may fall to there, but if Holtz fits the exact thing that Bob Murray had said in that hot stove of wanting a shooter. So if Holtz is available, I'm expecting the Ducks to take him. So
Yeah.
there we go. Do you think the Ducks have a good young defensive core looking in the future, such as Juice, Hakanpää, Mahura, Gooley? So Hakanpää is not actually that young.
He's 30.
He's 27.
29?
27.
27. Yeah.
27. Not 30. You added 3 years there.
Sorry.
No, the issue there is I don't think any of those guys, maybe Mahura, is probably the most suited to become a difference maker. But Juice is 25. Juice is not that young either. And so I think that's something to remember.
Yeah,
there.
the Ducks' young defense core is still not the best.
Yeah.
Really, the only guy that I would consider remotely a blue chip is Josh Mahura. Brendan Gooley, I don't know anymore.
I do want to give a shout out to a player that has been impressive throughout this year in college with the number he's put up in Henry Thrun. 4th round pick, I believe, last year of the Ducks, and been impressive, but
yes,
not exactly a difference maker though.
Not a blue chip. Hey, he could turn out to be one, but right now, I think the Ducks should use their later picks on defensemen. I still think that the way to win in the league is to have impact forwards, and if you don't have those, you can have a great blue line, and it's just still really hard to win. So that's what they should be trending towards. But yeah, I mean, Mahura is really the only guy. And like you said, Juice and Hakanpää are a bit older. Brendan Gooley, I'm selling that stock. That's my hot take today. Selling the Gooley stock. I'm out. I'm out on Brendan Gooley.
I'm pretty sure you had that take last time also.
No, but now I'm fully out. Now I'm just... And back then, I had a foot out the door. Now I just slammed the door shut, and I'm gone.
So Anime Holics D94 said, question, if they restart the season and playoffs go into July, how will they go about paying players when the date when players get paid is June 30th? Also, what happens to free agency in that situation? So I believe players actually get paid on July 1st. That's when signing bonuses do get paid. That's kind of, I think, what you're referencing there. Signing bonuses are always paid on July 1. I think due to extenuating circumstances, it will.
Yeah, that's going to be restructured.
Yeah, that's not an issue. That will be restructured. And also remember, players don't get paid for the playoffs. Yeah. So that's something to keep a part of this is that they don't get paid for that time. So if it is just straight playoffs, then that doesn't matter. For free agency, it will just get moved. I'm pretty sure we saw something similar to that when the 13-14 lockout happened, because once the lockout happens,
you mean 12-13?
Yeah, sorry, 12-13. That lockout happened. There's no free agency because there can't be, because there's no collective bargaining agreement in place, and so free agency started late. Free agency started once the CBA came intact, and so they'll probably just push back that date. I don't think those are either huge issues for the NHL. Anime Holics also asked, as a GM of one of the teams that were buyers at the deadline, how would you feel knowing that you might have traded all those assets for nothing if the season is canceled? Ooh, that's interesting.
Wait, what?
So if the season is canceled and there are no playoffs and you were a buyer at the deadline, how would you feel that you just traded a first-round pick for nothing?
I don't think the season's going to get canceled, but I just don't know what you can do. I mean, it's frustrating, but you can't rewind time.
No, you can't. You gotta do whatever you can to put your team in a position.
Yeah, you made the proper decision, so
you can't. Yeah, this type of situation is potentially once in a lifetime.
Hopefully.
So like I don't think it's
Yeah, you can't beat yourself up over that.
No.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
Betting 5555 asks, playing off that question, what would it take to move the number 1 pick? A lot. Lafreniere is the consensus number one.
It ain't moving. I'll just cut to the chase. Yeah. It ain't moving because why would the Senators? And I love how we're just awarding the Senators.
You are awarding the Senators that.
Well, okay. In all likelihood, why would the Senators move off of the first pick? That's what they need. That's really any team. If we look at the teams that are in contention for the first overall pick, what team is going to move off of that?
What if they get Lafreniere and Byfield?
Yeah, I mean that would be insane. But look at the teams. Detroit, they would keep it, right?
Yeah.
You could do the Godfather offer, offering all of your picks. You still keep the top pick. Ottawa, they're not going to do it. Anaheim, let's say that they had it and they were offered. It wouldn't make sense for them to move it either. LA, like there is just no circumstance of a team that would make that deal. None.
I agree. All right. So
it's not even so much about Lafreniere as it is about the fact that those teams desperately need kind of foundational player moving forward.
Yeah. Bionic Chris, let's end with this question. Is 50 games too much for a starter goalie? I don't think so. I think 60 is the break.
I think 50 is becoming the upper limit though. 50 to 55 is becoming the upper limit. 60 is probably too much at this point.
Yeah, probably. But I think that 50 is a little low because what is that? That's a 50-30 split.
50-32, yeah.
50-32. So I think that's...
I just don't know why that would be low. If you have a good backup, why not play your starter 50 games? And then in the postseason, have a rested starter.
That's fair. But
like
50 is definitely not too much.
No, it's not too much. I think to me, if you can stay between 50 to 55, you're doing it right. If you're at 60 and above, I mean, unless your goalie is just in fantastic shape, which they all are, I just don't see why that would be a smart strategy. And again, that's why in today's NHL, I think that the backup goalie position is becoming so important because it's essentially like buying insurance on a house. You've invested in that house, your starting goalie, you've paid him the salary, but now you need some insurance to make sure that that's going to pay off over time and actually gain in value or not depreciate in value.
Yep.
So, I mean, the Ducks have done a relatively good job of that, even though Carlisle wasn't really much of a proponent of that. I think this year they've been a little better about it. They've always seemed to have that aspect of it covered with a good backup.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think that's probably going to do it for the night for questions, but thank you everyone that were with us in the Twitch stream. This has been a fun one.
Yeah, it's been a fun one. Really weird circumstances. Yeah. We just hope that you enjoyed this podcast and that we can be of some relief to you in these crazy times.
Agreed.
That's the goal. So people were asking a little bit on Twitter today, are you guys going to keep doing the show? We are going to keep doing the show. I don't know really what we're going to be talking about, but knowing us, we'll find something to talk about.
Yeah. So I think the plan moving forward is probably keeping on the once a week schedule.
Yeah, once a week to me is going to be a good pace for us. It's going to give us time to come up with some topics. There's going to be plenty to talk about. I'm sure the news will keep trickling in. Of course, the fingers are all crossed that hockey will be back sooner rather than later, and that will be in a good circumstance and not just for the sake of bringing it back. But yeah, that's going to do it for us today, guys. A couple different ways that you can support the show. You can check us out on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/acpod. So with that, I don't think we've actually recorded a Patreon episode this month, but the different tiers. So for $1 a month, so this is just a $1 monthly pledge, you get access to our in-game Discord chat, which, to be quite honest, has picked up over these last couple months. I think that
shout out to everyone out there in the Discord chat that have made it a good time.
We are the few, but we are the proud. We have some pretty awesome contributors in our Discord chat. It's kind of become its own little community, which is awesome. Everyone in there is always looking to chime in, whether it's for a little humor or just with some really constructive stuff. It's just been awesome. And so thank you to everyone, like Jake was saying. But if you want to be a part of that, if you're a diehard fan and you want to have some feedback with other diehard fans during games, So on weeknights for Pacific Standard Time Ducks games, we have that in-game chat. It's a lot of fun. Now, for $5 a month, you still get access to the chat, but you also get 2 bonus episodes from us each month. So for those, we go more into league-wide topics. We sometimes go more in depth on certain Ducks topics that we don't get a chance to really hone in on the regular show. We sometimes go totally off script and talk about movies, Star Wars, wrestling. So it's just a lot of fun. If you enjoy what we're doing here and you want to see that continue, especially in these times where we are transitioning away from the only platform we've ever known, SB Nation, into what will be our own platform. Really, any support that you guys can give us is going to help us kind of get through that and be better on the other side of it. So that's, again, at patreon.com/acpod. Another way that you can support the show that's totally free to you, but that does have a pretty long-lasting effect. So leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Just search Anaheim Calling, leave your review, leave us your thoughts, and that helps us climb up the rankings, helps the show get noticed. And those metrics, they go a long way when we're trying to, whether it's, talk to sponsors or just make sure that the show is out there and is visible. So for the people that have left reviews in the past, we read them on the show, and we just appreciate them. They mean a lot to us. They're the bread and butter of the show. Like Joe already, or like, why did I call you Joe? Well, like Jake already mentioned.
Wow.
I have no idea why I said Joe.
Wow.
Like Jake already mentioned, we are on YouTube. So if you're a YouTube fan, if that's how you enjoy your podcast, well, definitely go check us out there. We're also on Spotify. We are on Stitcher. Check out those platforms. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91. I definitely recommend following him in these dark times because he's got you covered on the wrestling side of things.
If wrestling continues, my Twitter account will probably become.
You might just have to become a full-on wrestling account.
Maybe. Hey,
you might. That might have to be your lockout.
Will everything become wrestling tweet from you? Or just wrestling tweet replies?
At this point, I couldn't do that if it was every single tweet.
At this point, are you gonna have to watch wrestling?
Doubtful.
Although
I don't know what else I'm gonna watch.
Yeah, maybe you will watch wrestling.
Maybe that'll be our new thing. Maybe that'll be our escape from this horrible situation.
Here's what I think you should do. We're gonna record a Patreon episode this weekend. I think you should sit down and watch either the most recent episode of AEW, or watch the most recent pay-per-view of AEW. I can give you my login so you can watch it. Don't worry.
Maybe.
We'll see. We'll see. Let us know if you'd like to hear that, to hear Felix's review, and we can go over a couple matches. I feel like it would be hilarious.
The only way I do that is if there is some kind of alcohol involved.
You at least have to watch the Orange Cassidy match. Maybe,
I really don't.
Or maybe this. Maybe we figure out a way this weekend for you to come on over to my place. We can sit down and have a beer and watch some of the matches, and then record afterwards.
We'll figure something out.
All right.
We'll do something ridiculous.
I do want to make mention of this though, because I know you had said it, but I also kind of want to echo what you said. That stay safe out there. Hopefully, we can provide a little bit of entertainment for you in this kind of very uncertain time and a little bit scary.
It feels like everything is changing by the hour.
Yeah.
I think what I'm learning is maybe stay off Twitter for most of the day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
It's not really healthy to just read beat by beat what's going on.
But I do want to say, try not to live in fear. Just try to keep on moving. And we love all of you. We're all super supportive and are super appreciative of everything that you all have done for us, done for this podcast. And even if this somehow might be the last one, this is the Anaheim Calling podcast.
The show goes on.
The show goes on, and we love all of you.
Yep. Wow, Jake, just going for the jugular.
A little emotional there.
A little sentimental. I like it. Yeah. Well, on that totally selfless note, I'm gonna flip to a totally selfish note. You can follow me on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. I actually have an article out at the fourth period that is kind of dated now, but I tracked. Actually, it's not dated because the season's canceled, so it's at a standstill. I did a breakdown player by player of all the trade deadline acquisitions, looking at how everyone has played. So check that out. And really, that's it. Like, just to once again echo everything that's been said. do everything you can, take proper procedures. Hopefully you work somewhere where you can work from home, sanitize, try to avoid large gatherings, and we're gonna get through this. We're gonna absolutely get through this. We're gonna be better for it, and the show, like Jake said, will go on. So,
Yep.
on that note, everyone, have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you at the next show.
Love you all. Bye.